Okay, so to understand the 3/5 compromise, you really have to understand and remember what we talked about yesterday with the how representation worked under the Great Compromise. So representation in Congress, if you'll remember, in the House of Representatives is based on population. And then in the Senate, it's equal for each state. So the larger your population in the House of Representatives, the larger your state's population, the House of Representatives, you will have a proportional number of votes. So if you have 15% of the population of a state in the House of Representatives, you'll have approximately 15% of the representatives. And so the larger your state is, the larger your voice is in the House of Representatives. So then that begs a question. What do you do about representation? What do you do about the slave population? Do they count towards your total population? Well, the northern states did not want to count slaves towards representation in Congress. The reasoning is, well, they're not considered citizens. They're not going to be voting, so therefore they should not be represented. Well, the southern states differ. They say, well, they are part of our population, so they should count, and therefore that would give the southern states more representatives because their population would increase because they have a much higher number of slaves. If you'll remember from yesterday, we noticed there is a slave population in the northern states, but the slave population in the northern states does not increase their population enough to really give them any more representatives. In the southern states, that's not true. They gain representatives if they gain population based on slavery. So they argued back and forth, and ultimately they decide, okay, we will have a compromise, and it's known as the 3/5 compromise. So they agree on a 3/5 ratio where every 5 slaves would count as 3 towards their population. And this is a benefit for the southern states because it gives them more representatives. And I've got a few examples here. So in 1793, southern states had 47 seats in the House of Representatives instead of 33. Their free population would have only given them 33 seats in the House of Representatives. But instead, they end up with 47, which gives them a bigger voice in the government. It gives them more power in the government than they otherwise would have had. In 1812, they have 76 representatives instead of 59. And by 1833, they have 98 representatives instead of 73. And so it's not, and so what it does is it gives them a bigger voice than they would have had. Those numbers continue until the Civil War. And when there's no longer a slave population. Now, those former slaves will now be counted as citizens, but in theory would also be able to vote. When we get to the Civil War, you'll see how much of that actually does happen. But that's the 3/5 compromise. That's the key part to the 3/5 compromise.